Welcome to the Emergency Traffic Podcast. Welcome to the Emergency Traffic Podcast, where we talk about line of duty deaths of firefighters and paramedics and try to learn from these tragic incidents so that we can do better next time. This is one of our Tailboard talks. We haven't done one for a while. This will be Tailboard talk number 13. And this is simply where we get together and talk about current issues or issues that are on our mind. So today we have the whole gang. So myself, Paul, and we have Doug and Dirk and Denis. So it's going to be a lively discussion. And the subject is going to be the Baltimore recent memo that's been issued by the Baltimore Fire Department to try to provide guidance to their personnel after another tragic line of duty death that occurred in October in a vacant row house. And this is one of several. There was one in 2022 we did an episode on. There was one in 2014 where a safety officer died in a vacant house post-fire almost. And then there was one where a recruit died in 2007 in a vacant row house that was being used as a acquired structure for live fire training. So we're going to talk about those. But first, how's everybody doing? What's new, Doug?
Hey, Paul, I'm doing well. I'm looking forward to our talk here. We've already had our off-air talk, which got us fired up a little bit. But yeah, it's good. I put up some more Christmas decorations today, so we're getting that all almost done, and a couple of days off, back to work tomorrow. And yeah, you're wearing some kind of Christmas shirt there.
Christmas shirt. It's really comfy. That's why I put it on. My wife said, "Why are you wearing that shirt? It's not Christmas. You haven't even turned the Christmas lights on yet." I know, but it's really comfy and it's red and it's Friday. So
fair enough. Yeah, that's about all that's new with me.
How about Denis got a shirt with a blue nose or something on it, being a true Lunenburger type fellow. Although were you born in Louisburg?
No, I was actually born in the Northwest Territories.
Oh, yes, that's right. Your father was working for the feds up in the north, right?
Yeah, up on the Dew line.
Yeah, took your wife there and said, "Come with me. We're going to go on an adventure." His wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was an adventure, all right. Mosquitoes as big as airplanes.
How are you today, sir?
I'm fine, and I am wearing my Nova Scotia sweatshirt. And it's starting to get a little wintry here. We're below zero at nights, and snow and slush and crap. And my siding contractor is finally showing up on Monday to do my siding repair, so that's good.
Yeah.
Says it's going to take 10 days or so. So going to put a big dumpster in my yard. I hope he's done soon, because I got we do something called a first cousins, where all of our relations on a certain side of the family, are all invited. And so we got between 20 and 30 people coming over for a potluck dinner on second week in December. So we're hoping that, it'll be all good. So hopefully my siding contractor is gone by then.
Dirk, how are you? You've got a bit of a sore voice from getting together with some of your crews.
Yeah, I'm trying to hold back today. No, I just feel a little bit under the weather, just a little head cold, kind of. And going out with my crew didn't really help. It was pretty noisy. We were watching the Oilers. Got us pretty upset. And so we had to speak up, and that wasn't good for my voice. So that's all.
The Oilers make you drink more.
Yes, but I couldn't, unfortunately, because I was driving. But yeah, so little farewell there from my first crew that I was assigned to as an officer. So it was pretty nice, and I'm looking forward to the new platoon and the new station and the new crews, and so it's always exciting to meet new people.
Talking about the Oilers.
Yeah, that's not important. You can cut that out.
No, that stuff's good. Hey, how about the Alouettes pulling off a Grey Cup victory? Woohoo! Yay!
Grey Cup.
Seconds to go.
Grey Cup.
That
Yeah.
was what you call a Hail Mary.
It was apparently. We missed the last half. I didn't get to watch it, but
Oh, I saw it on replay. It was incredible.
nice,
Yeah,
nice.
I had the game on in the background kind of thing, and saw the end drive, the end plays. So what I was, I mean, I didn't really care, but if somebody had to win, I was happy Montreal did because they have the Eskimos' old coach.
I like it. Well, and I was in Saskatchewan this week and visiting with my friends there, and they said they were all cheering for Montreal, and I said, "What?" And they're going, "Well, yeah, because our quarterback was there, and our defensive end coach is the coach or
Well,
something." And
that's Saskatchewan and Winnipeg. I think is a big rivalry too.
right, yeah, and they said we can't cheer for
Yeah,
Winnipeg. So,
looks like the Edmonton Oilers fans. It's ABC, right? Anybody but Calgary.
yep. What's the football team called again in Edmonton?
I
Okay,
don't know. The
all right.
Elks. Elks. Yeah.
All right. So, the fire department of Baltimore City Fire Department, issued a memo um, recently, November 1st. Actually, they issued one November or October 23rd or something, and then they changed it, and they issued a memo October 1st about
November
well,
1st.
November 1st, about well-involved structure fires and procedures to follow. This caused quite a bit of discussion around North America and within our little podcast group here. And so we thought we should do a tailboard talk about it. Part of the reasoning behind, of course, the issuance of this memo, in my opinion, is they recently had a fire in October of 2023 where one firefighter died in a vacant row house fire, and several other firefighters were injured. It was quick. I just listened to the audio today. It was like 3 minutes in or something that this firefighter had a mayday. And then, of course, last year in January of 2022, they lost several firefighters. Was it four? Two firefighters and several injured at the Stricker Street fire. And then in 2014, they actually lost a safety officer who was alone, went in post fire into the building in 2014. He walked in the back door. He had not been informed that the floor had been removed previous to the fire in the building, and walked in, fell in the basement, was alone, died in the basement. No one else checked on him. All units left scene. He was still there. And it was actually the people in the area called in and said, "Hey, there's a fire truck sitting on the street here, a pickup or SUV. We're kind of wondering, is the guy still here?" And they came back and found this poor safety officer deceased in the basement in 2014. And then in 2007, they were using an abandoned row house for training, and a recruit died during that training evolution, and there was numerous issues around that. Um, there was a perception that they were trying to fail the recruit due to fitness issues, maybe. But the house itself had holes in the walls. It had that Excelsior, which we encountered on another call, Denny. I think you looked it up, which is like a fabric or a kind of a wood, almost like wood chips or something,
Shavings, more like
shavings,
shavings.
and the house was full of it, and they had holes in the walls, and they lit multiple fires in the building. The recruits were told to go in and attack. We'll do an episode on it, but the recruits were told to go up on the third floor, past the
Go above the fire.
past the other fires to suppress the fire on the third floor, and then the building got going, which wasn't the intent, and they couldn't control it. They had inadequate water supplies. They say the training guys didn't have communications. The training guys didn't have 1041 level 1 certifications. The training guys they didn't have control where people were, and the recruits' turnout pants were over 10 years old and poorly repaired, and she suffered burns and subsequently died. I believe there's a lawsuit, and it was settled for a couple $100,000 over that fire. So anyway, there's been this repeated row house fatalities in Baltimore, which of course the Stricker Street one was the biggest one, and so that's why we wanted to talk about this memo. Okay, so the original memo, October 31st, 2021, was that Units arriving on scene of a well-involved structure fire, whether occupied or vacant, will only initiate an exterior attack with hand lines and/or apparatus-mounted master stream appliances. Exterior attack will be in place until directed to do so otherwise by the first arriving battalion chief. As an interior attack can commence on a confirmed occupied dwellings after the following has taken place: a significant knockdown of visible fire that was showing upon arrival, a complete 360 evaluation or side Charlie for row houses, along with a conducted update from the roof if possible. The first arriving battalion chief has done a comprehensive risk-reward analysis. First arriving battalion chief deems the structure is sound for members to operate safely inside. Confirmed vacant structures with a weather code X-ray, which is the sign program that Baltimore had started years ago that would identify abandoned structures, although they were way behind and hadn't continued. I think they've continued again now. Will not continue to be extinguished from the exterior unless directed to, or not, will continue to be extinguished from the exterior unless directed to otherwise by the on-scene battalion chief. The only time the above directive will be deviated from is when there is an actual sighting of a trapped individual by on-scene personnel and conditions dictate the rescue can be effected safely without causing injury or worse to departmental personnel. Emphasis placed on identifying and communicating the structure's status as early in the incident as possible. If both battalion chiefs have delayed responses, the first dispatch chief will then designate, if possible, a senior officer to be in charge. In summary, that was the first memo. And I mean, they've lost several firefighters over the past 10 years in vacant or abandoned row houses, and there's been a lot of questions in mind as to why they're in there if they're vacant and they're not safe. These buildings are decrepit and they're being injured by the products of combustion. I know I listened to the audio on the fire in October, and it sounds like they had a huge blaze. Like they were asking engines, "I want all your discharges flowing." Several times they said that. So I'm guessing that's where this comes from.
My issue with this whole memo and what you're saying is, in my opinion, a building being quote unquote vacant should not be a determining factor on your operations. A building being structurally unsound, 100% should be a determining factor on your operations. But we all know in big cities, vacant buildings are occupied by somebody. And vacant buildings don't just start on fire by themselves because there's no utilities to them. There's nothing being fed, there's no electricity, there's nothing that would just happen to start on fire. They're often caused by a human element, which means if there's a vacant building on fire, there was probably at least at one time recently a person in there. So if you're coming to a vacant fire that is, from your training as a fire officer, structurally sound enough to make an interior attack based on what you see with the building and what the fire conditions are and all that, then you should be going in to do your fire attack and your search and rescue. Vacant or not vacant, a building that appears to be well involved in heavy fire that you can't go into or structurally unsound, you shouldn't go into that if it's occupied or not. It doesn't matter, in my opinion, it doesn't matter if the building is vacant or not. What matters is if the conditions the building and fire are presenting to you are tenable for you to be going in to do an interior fire attack and a primary search.
And Denis and I are both going, I want to talk. Okay.
I would make a distinction between vacant and derelict. In some cities like Baltimore and Buffalo and quite a few other places around, there is a huge surplus of derelict buildings. There's not a few vacant buildings as a single-digit percentage of buildings in the cities. In these cities, there are like significant numbers, like in some cases approaching 1 in 5 buildings on a block, sometimes even more. And these buildings are significantly derelict. They're vacant, but they've been vacant for a significant amount of time. And I agree with Doug. There is a very good chance that there might be squatters in those buildings. That's a possibility. There's no doubt about that. And you're right, fires don't start by themselves when there's no electricity to the building, there's no gas to the building, there's no reasonable reason why it might be caused, except, you can still have lightning and you can have other issues, but you can also have fires caused by vandalism and by insurance fraud. That can happen also. And also by owners and others just wanting the building gone. They just don't want it there. They don't want to look at it, or they may wish to redevelop the property. So they can be arson fires.
Sure, and arsonists might be inside the building, is my point. Like,
yeah, I have a lot of sympathy for arsonists that are still inside their building. And
well, it's not our job to determine who's worth saving and who's not.
yeah, it's a difficult call. I agree with you. The best system is for you to know all of your buildings in your district, so that you know which ones are derelict and unsafe and which ones are merely vacant and possibility of people being inside. So it's a tough call.
Yeah, but
and we're getting it wrong when we're killing firefighters.
That's right. We're getting it wrong. But go back to 2007. They trained the firefighters to go past the fire.
There's no excuse for that
to
one.
go above the fire.
This memo is not about 2007, though.
Yes, it is.
This memo is about the fires they've had recently.
I just talked about this with my friends who are in the mining industry yesterday at breakfast. We talked about this, and we said, how do we get employees to follow policy? How do we get people to follow procedures that we're supposed to keep them safe, to not do silly things, not make mistakes? And the only way to do it is stuff like these memos. In 2007, they taught people to go beyond the fire and fight the fire without a water supply. They had a hose line, but they might not even have a hose line, but they didn't have adequate water to put the fire out if the building got going. In 2014, the safety officer went in the building alone that was still full of smoke and walked in and fell in the basement.
Was he even logged in on the accountability system? You've got to ask that question.
That's a question. And then in 2022, Stricker Street, the captain of the first in truck or engine cut the plywood off the front door to go in. Now, yes, it was arson most likely in that abandoned building that had a fire before and the roof was through at the time. They didn't know that. It wasn't in the systems, which it should have been. They should have been identified. But if you're cutting the plywood off the door and going in just in case someone's in there and the fire's coming out, now they did knock it back. The fire was really fierce and they hit it with a line, and that's, I think, what caused them to go in, because the fire did back off, and then they got caught because right away the fire grew, which is why they're writing a memo. So we got to stop killing people here.
And why there's a need for situational awareness. Do your 360. For people getting into the building, it should be relatively obvious where they're getting in. It's usually not on the front. It's somewhere in the back.
Mm-hmm.
I had a derelict high school complex in one of the places I was the fire chief, and the kids were getting in and they were filming, snuff films and all kinds of other stuff, not simulated obviously, doing all kinds of other things inside that building. And if you looked for it, you could see where they were getting in, and it was well known in the community that there were people in those buildings. But we had a major fire there, a major fire. I already told you guys about this. We were there for a couple of days, and there was nobody in the building. And if there was, we never found them.
Well, I'm still going to go back to my point about my problem with this memo is that it says if it's a vacant building, not a derelict building, not a abandoned for 15 years with 6 fires the previous building. It says a vacant building.
Yeah, I think you have a point, Doug.
So why is the new memo better? It says the same thing.
My other issue, I'm glad you brought that up, Paul, because that's my next point. That it says you must wait for the first arriving battalion chief. Because that is not right. You should not have to wait for the first chief to arrive before a captain, or an officer, lieutenant or captain, who has proven they deserve to be in that spot and can make decisions, they shouldn't have to wait for dad to arrive before they can go do their job. They should have the training to know, can I go in or not?
I'm glad you said training, Doug. I think that's an excessively important point. You might have a captain who's been acting for a week. He acts 2 weeks of the year, 3 weeks of the year, or shifts of the year. That's all he does. So he's essentially a first-class firefighter and might not have received adequate training, might not even have adequate skills. And maybe that's what's behind this memo, is something more specific to an understanding of their personnel.
But in that situation, he's not the only officer there. He can defer. He can wait 2 seconds or 1 minute for the next arriving unit and not have to wait 5 or 10 minutes for a chief that might be on the other side of his district.
It also says to the more experienced officer, they kind of explained that it doesn't have to be a battalion chief, could be a more experienced officer.
Yeah, it says the senior officer or battalion chief in the second memo.
We're not talking about the second memo yet.
But remember,
I'm talking about my issues with the first memo that say the first arriving battalion chief. That was where my issue was with the memo.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and in Stricker Street, the big problem there was that the 360 and command not being there at first, and also in Boston and the one in San Francisco, those were all issues where command wasn't in control of the initial actions, which is, I think, kind of where they're going here is for, and training. That was a thing in Stricker Street, was they determined that officer training wasn't adequate. Right. So you've got an officer training issue, and we can't change that tomorrow. In the meantime, now we lost another guy and injured 4 others in this last one in October. Let's do this memo.
Yeah, and we all know that when you arrive in an all-hands fire, when things are really popping, there are some things that go out the window that if you had more time, you would like to do. And one of those I would suggest on row housing is doing your 360, because it's not that easy.
Right.
You have to get in through an adjacent unit and out the back, or do the walk around. And it's not always possible. Sometimes you got to go through fences. Sometimes you can't walk around.
Well, and
so,
when we did,
it's too far.
You weren't here for the Stricker Street one, Denny, but the SOP, if I remember right, is that the second due units went to the rear. First due went to the front, second due to the rear. And by radio, they talked about the conditions on the back.
Yeah.
Dirk?
I'm just very quiet because of my voice. And I agree with Doug on most things. Don't tell him that. Oh, shit, he's listening. No, it's the second memo definitely. The first one was not great from a serving the public point of view and from a command point of view. The second one, I think we can all agree that that's definitely the better one. And as chief officers and officers, we definitely have to make sure that our people are safe, right? That's our first priority. So training is important. Experience is important. Where do you get the experience from when you don't have fires? And what's adequate training? That's the other thing, right? We could talk about that.
I have one more issue with the first memo, and where it says that the only time you can deviate from this is when you see somebody in the building. So if you show up and someone says, my friend's in there, my brother, my kid, my whoever, they're in there. You have to say, well, I don't see them, so I have to wait for the chief to get here to say I can go in. That's taking the job of a firefighter completely out of those company officers' hands.
Yeah, they did rewrite that part, and they say if there's a credible report of a trapped individual with survivable spaces.
So we can go to the second memo now, which basically addresses all the issues I have with the first memo, and I won't complain too much about the second one because I don't have much to say about it.
I can say something about it. The term survivable space, what's the definition for that? Is it searchable or is it survivable? Is it survivable for the civilian with no protective gear, or is it searchable for firefighters to go in and pull somebody out safely that
And
Well,
may or may not be surviving that fire?
that's a training thing again.
that's ULSFRI and Blue Card is that a person without protective gear could be alive or savable. So they're not in the room where the fire's venting out of. They're in another room where fire's not venting out, or they're in another
Right.
area of the building, is what they're looking at here.
Right. But we all know that the skills in the fire service are sometimes not what they should be. How many times have you listened to radio calls and you hear the first arriving saying, "We have a fully involved structure fire," when they don't? They've got flames showing from second floor windows. That is not fully involved. There's all kinds of survivable spaces.
I
That, that
mean,
So
that's problem
that's all
language.
part of the
That's the
problem.
problem of the language we're using, because there's terms for the same, different terms for the same thing, or the same term for different things. Like everything has a different meaning in different parts of the country, and I
Sure.
think that that's a problem. And as a department, I think you have to make really sure that what is the definition of survival, what is the definition of fully
Yeah.
involved, if you ever use
Yeah.
that term.
Well, and they kind of did that with the second memo. The first memo just says if you're arriving on scene of a well-involved structure fire. In the second memo, it defines well-involved structure fire as the fire has spread throughout the majority of the building or structure, one of the highest intensity. These types of fires are well advanced without any occupant survivable space and where structural integrity is compromised. So they're telling
which
you if you see this, that's what we're talking about here. They're taking out the, well, what does well involved mean? What's well involved to
Right.
you versus well involved to me?
which is
They're
which is we saw that in Stricker Street because they had the video footages, and it was what you would determine as a well involved structure fire. And I'm assuming that the other one was the same, the one in October. We have no reports yet, just the audio.
So one of the issues there again is back to training, and one of the things that they teach you, or they should be teaching you as an incident commander or the officer on the first in truck doing your reports, and your arrival report be accurate, get your situational awareness, understand what's going on, and some of the fundamentals are: where's the fire and where's it going? And that will tell you an awful lot about survivable spaces, and whether there are any, and also whether your own folks are going to be in danger. So that's all part of it.
Like we
And
talked,
sometimes it's not that easy to know these, but experience does help a bit.
like we talked about before we turned the recording on. That's exactly what Slicers says. Where's the fire? What's the flow path? Can we stop the control of the fire before? And then if there's an opportunity to rescue or ventilate or anything else, salvage, we do it. But the first, thing is where's the fire? What's the flow path? And that's where people keep. I mean, that's why ULFSRI and these other are investing millions of dollars in trying to scientifically prove and then educate firefighters across North America as to how not to get hurt, how not to be injured in a fire. Why we do the podcast is to learn about this stuff. And so that's the part I like about this memo. It's a shame they have to do it to educate their firefighters, but someone stood up and said, we got to stop this. How are we going to do it?
And just for those who don't remember Slicers or who have never learned it, I'm going to read you what it stands for. And this is from Firefighter Nation, so it's not universal. Sometimes there's some small changes in language. But basically, Slicers: size up, that's the S; locate, L; identify and control the fire path. In other words, where's the fire going? Where are the hot gases going? C for cool the heated space, and then E for extinguish, R for rescue, and S for salvage. So that's basically for engine company ops. So that's Slicers. Size up.
And nowhere in there does it say you have to do anything from the outside, Paul.
No,
You're right.
no, but cooling, there are different tactics there, right, Doug?
Well, I get that, but I think there's a huge drive in our fire service right now that every structure fire you come to, you have to hit it hard from the yard before you go in. And
Because
people, hang on, Paul. People stop reading the paragraph when they get to that point. What they don't know is it only matters if you can hit it hard from the yard and then immediately a different crew go in. If you're hitting it hard
Right.
from the yard and then you have to walk around and go find the door and go do this and stretch on the line and then go in, you've done nothing but waste time.
the ULSFRI studies show that cooling from the outside is critical. Yes,
You can buy time.
you're buying time, exactly. And the studies all show that it's effective, because if you don't cool it from the outside first, the people in that space are going to die, and the conditions in the building are deteriorating. By the time you open the door and go in, you're going to have a bigger fire. So yes, but the time does need to be reduced as much as possible between those two actions. I know some of the nozzle forward and stuff, like, guys, hey, it's not worth doing it unless you can be there within 90 seconds or something. Well, it's still better than not doing it, in my opinion.
Yeah. But you got to know what you're doing.
They're teaching, Paul. I mean, no offense, but you're old. When you learned how to do firefighting, you were taught to never spray water into smoke. Go find the fire and then put the fire out. Now they're all saying cool as you advance. So you're cooling all those compartments from inside as you're advancing to them, instead of cooling from outside and then running around to the door and letting the fire get back to exactly where it was before you get there. You're taking out the knock it down, let it build up again, and you're just going in and knocking it down and leaving it down.
But Doug, all of this, is theory, right? They're tools in the toolbox.
Sure.
It's all got to be an experienced set of hands on the nozzle and in command to know when is enough, where's the right place, when you need to stop, when you need to advance, when you're in the flow path and you need to do something. You can write all these techniques down, but really they're just tools, and they've got to be leavened with experience and skill.
I 100%
right?
agree, and I know that there are fires that you do hit from the outside because you can't go in because there's too much fire. What I'm finding is there's a drive or a push, or that people think every single fire you have to hit it hard before you go in. You have to do transitional attack, and that's not true. You can just go in and put the fire out.
Yeah,
but
when they say every single, it's wrong.
That's your typical approach from firefighters. Just show me one way. I just need one way. I don't want to know why and what. Just give me one way. And I hear this all the time. And it's just, firefighting is not that simple. If you think it's that simple, then maybe look for a different job, because it ain't, right? But that was the implication. And then UL, when they started their research 12 years ago with the Governor's Island experiment, they said this is just step one. Don't come to conclusions. We're just trying out something here. And then they build on that. But people needed, or they use this as an excuse, or we finally have some science, and now every fire has to be hit from the outside. And that's just not true. And I think UL down the road really emphasized that. But the message is still, like, at some point, just people decide, no, we'll not listen to it anymore, right?
Well, the big problem is they're trying to change the mindset of thousands and thousands of old firefighters who have always gone beyond the fire. They've gone in to do a search. Some other guys are doing a vent because the vent is going to cool it. I mean, guys, you can look at it today. Look at the whatever street there fire in LA 2 years ago, where the commercial one, what's it called? What's the street? There's a great video on there. Boyd Street fire. I mean, what are they doing? And LA's still doing it today. They're venting the roof. Why are you venting the roof? There was another one recently here, Houston or someplace. They fell through the roof. And again, the question was, what the hell are you doing on the roof anyway? Well, it's going to cool the space. Well, no, in a modern fire, it's not going to cool the space. They've proven it in ULFSRI. It makes the fire burn hotter. And your guys are now getting roasted because you created a flow path. So I think UL's trying to change the mindset with starting with Governor's Island. And they're still trying to change it today. And this is the problem large urban fire departments have, is how do we change those tactics so that people know that there's different ways to open the box here. We don't do it all the same, like you just said, Dirk.
I think there's two camps here. There's the ones that you said, yeah, it's the old guys that don't want to change. But then there's the other camp that says we have to protect our firefighters no matter what. We don't care about the public. Safety, safety, safety first. Right?
Well, like
And
you're in
that is those are the two camps that are fighting, right? I don't ever want to flow water from the outside, and the other guy says you're always going to flow water from the outside. We are not going to go inside, and
look at
those are the two camps, right?
look at what Brunacini said. If you think training's expensive, wait till you lose a guy, right? And how many guys dead in Phoenix lately? Oops, none. Why?
But
Because they've
but
adopted these practices.
yeah, but that's the thing. See, this is not your granddad's fire anymore.
Right.
It's not even your dad's fire anymore. Stuff has changed, and training is the key. We need to be training. We also need to have multiple tactics in our toolbox, and we need to be willing to try them for a few seconds if that's all it takes to find out that it's not right, and move on to the next
And
one.
if you can't train
It's
all your officers and your
right,
battalion chiefs, what do? You write a
right,
memo and say, guys, from now on, this is our restrictions because we're not going to have any more guys. This is the same as the chief in Worcester saying no more people are going into the cold storage building. He's standing in front of the door and said enough is enough. Well, this is Baltimore administration saying enough is enough. We have to put a stop to this. We can't lose more guys because
yeah.
our officers don't have the skill to size it up properly.
We don't have the memos that are flying behind the scenes,
Yeah.
and there's lots of
Well,
those, I'm sure.
my issue with this whole thing, Paul, was the words in the first memo.
First memo. Yeah.
Yep.
When things got fixed and the revised
Too
memo
broad.
came out, then it made way more sense. And it came down to like, don't be an idiot and go into fires that you shouldn't be going into.
Agreed.
And it
Agreed.
explained a little bit more about these are the fires that you shouldn't go into. Where the first memo that got my back up, if whatever you want to say, basically took all the decision making out of company officers, wouldn't let the fire department be the fire department, and said, let's just show up, we'll spray it from the outside. Who cares? It's vacant anyways. We don't care if somebody might be in there. Where the second memo allows the company officers to make the decision. But agreed, it's saying you have to do a 360. You have to knock down visible fire if you see it. You have to do a risk reward analysis. But it took out the fact that you can't go in any vacant building. It took out the fact that you have to wait for the battalion chief to arrive. And it took out the fact that you can't go in if somebody tells you somebody's in there. Those are the things that I didn't like about the first one.
And I don't think it was saying we don't care if there's anybody in there or not. Is that if you don't have proof there's someone in there, we're not going to risk your life. But you fine tuned it now, which is good.
It said proof was you had to see them.
You see them.
So
Yep.
if I show up and you tell me, hey, my wife's in there,
Yeah.
that's not proof enough. That's wrong. That's wrong. That's our job. And sorry to say, but our job has a little bit of risk involved. And when somebody says there's somebody in there, that's the time to take the risk. Now, I'm not saying you go into every building and rage into an inferno.
But Doug,
But
how do
you
we
have
control?
to
Hang
take
on.
calculated risks.
Yes. Okay. We've talked about calculated risk before, and you and I and Dirk have had this debate about calculated risk. And you've both said, oh, yeah, I know. My cancer risk is high, but that's okay. I'm a firefighter, and I knew that coming in. Yeah, but it still doesn't mean wear your turnout gear on the rooftop campout because it's been proven your turnout gear is dangerous to you. Don't wear it all the time. Yeah, yes, it's a risk being a firefighter, but we don't need to make the risk worse.
But we all agree that we are able to minimize these risks by still performing our job. Same
Yep.
as Miami-Dade went away from their clean cap initiative because it doesn't work. It doesn't
Right.
serve the people. And that's the first part. That is the mission. We serve the people first. And then we come third. So yes, we can minimize that, but we shouldn't forget to what the mission is. And when we start not believing the public that is standing in front of a burning house, then why are we responding to outside fire because somebody saw some smoke and we're setting a full first alarm there? No, everybody's siren blazing, risking traffic, our lives in the traffic, which is still the higher risk than actually a structure fire. When we start, well, we don't believe the people that are standing in front of a burning building, right? So
And it's true. And of course, guys, in case you didn't know it, I mean, Doug and Dirk, you guys, we're not the average firefighter here. You guys, you're however many years old, Dirk, and you're still going to nozzle forward and working hard to be on top of your game. And unfortunately, that's not the average firefighter in North America, and that's why we do the podcast to try to help people learn, you know, how to be better. Because you're right, if you're not studying it all the time and becoming an expert at it, you're going to get hurt. But how do we get everybody to be engaged, to be experts at the job?
Well, one of the things that we should never forget is behind every OP or OG or standing order like this memo, there's everybody who reads this, or every firefighter practitioner who reads these things and goes to these incidents really has to understand what's behind the OG, what's behind the memo, understand the reasoning for it, and understand when the situation is not as was envisioned when it was written. In other words, the exception. In other words, an OG is an operating guideline, and you can deviate from it. You need to know why you've deviated. You need to have the proper reasoning. In other words, you need to have the experience and the knowledge and the applicability of skills, the KSAs. You need to have that in order to make a decision that's different from the memo. The problem with memos, and I get Doug's point, is when you read the memo and you say, we got a hard line, follow exactly what the memo says, we throw all of our KSAs out the window because the memo says you won't, you don't. That's problematic. However, if your firefighting force and the people that are actually the practitioners going to the fires don't have the background that they need to understand what's behind the memo, understand what's killing their firefighters, and understand when it makes sense to deviate because you're sure there's somebody in there because you can believe the reports you've got and you believe that you can do the job, within your risk envelope, then there's a problem if you don't know those things. And I'll relate something that I just saw on a firefighters forum. I won't say where it was, but there was somebody who posted anonymously, and that was a good thing because the question they asked was, well, I've completed my firefighter level 1 and I'm looking at the JPRs, the next task for firefighter level 2, and I don't think it's worth taking that. It says, it just looks to be all administrative to me. Why would I bother? And I'm thinking to myself, there's the door, buddy. It's not what I typed in. I says, man, never pass up a training opportunity. You need those skills, particularly if you want to get on further, you want to take officers later, you want to know what you're doing. You think there's nothing there. There's way more there. That's just really a syllabus for what you need to continue learning through the rest of your career. But really, if that's what you think, you're not in the right job. You shouldn't be thinking that way. It's time to leave.
So basically, what Baltimore did, they cut out the work for the training academy because now they have to educate, not just the memo. Because again, the memo, guys, read it or don't read it, follow it or don't follow it. So there has to be a follow up throughout the whole department and explain what is survivable, what is dilapidated, what is. So that's a lot of work for a big department, right?
Years.
Same as Charleston. Exactly the same thing. It was a culture as well as equipment and training and everything. How do you change it all? Now, how do you change Baltimore or whatever department? You put your name there. Look at Newark. Okay. How do we, there's going to be a memo in Newark. They're already talking about a training academy and stuff. The 1 or 2 battalion chiefs that tried to go to shipboard firefighter training got told, yeah, you can, but we're not paying for it and it's on your own time. And it's like, hello, these ships are in Newark and they're paying taxes. Nope, not on my watch. We can't afford it, right? I mean, and there's we could probably go through. There's so many of these.
There's a little bit of difference between the Charleston fire, the Newark fire, and these Baltimore fires in the sense that Charleston was a ship fire doesn't happen very often. Low frequency.
High risk.
The sofa fire was a major commercial structure fire.
Yep.
Not
Yep.
very common.
Yep.
Baltimore is 50% vacant buildings. They go to lots of vacant building fires, and they probably do a really good job and make grabs at lots of them. This is their quote-unquote bread and butter. Some went really wrong and people died. The training one, that's kind of inexcusable. Like we talked, training is you have the control. The safety officer, you can write all day about mistakes made there. But the ones where they responded to a building fire and things went wrong, I'm not saying that that's okay, and I'm okay with firefighters dying. But Baltimore goes to those fires every single day and people don't die. Those ones, things went wrong. And I've been walking to work lately listening to our show, the ones that I missed. And then I kind of, in my mind, I'm walking, I corresponded it to the Oilers playing shitty this year, where it's not one thing that goes wrong that leads to an LODD. It's not one thing that goes wrong to the Oilers losing 7-1. There's multiple things that happen that go wrong, and then it's too much to handle, right? You can handle a big fire. You can handle a collapse. It's hard to handle a big fire that collapses on firefighters. That's a lot to handle. So when we talk about doing this thing on Baltimore, I want, in my mind, I made a point that Baltimore's not a bad fire department. They go to these calls all the time. They put them out all the time. They probably go to multiple. I looked at some runs from like 2017. Some of their engines and ladders are going to 5,000 calls a year. They're going to vacant building fires lots and doing a really good job at lots of them.
Doug, and I wrote it in the chat, but the problem with the 5,000 runs, the problem with going to a sofa store with a booster line or 1.5 inches, the problem with going into a ship when you don't know what you're doing, the problem with the fire truck driving on the runway in Lima, Peru, it's all complacency by senior staff. This is complacency. We're not using our expert skills. It's the same. That's why I teach incident command. The biggest risk is that if you don't have enough of an organization to manage the what ifs, which you just listed, what if the fire gets too big? What if something happens? What if the roof collapses? What if the fire truck quits working? What if Paul has a heart attack? If you're not set to deal with that, because you never have to, all those 5,000 runs, they all went well, then you're not prepared to deal with it. And how do we fight that complacency all the time? Because that's the common thread here. Is complacency, and what Dirk said is, if you have, and whoever, I had Brunacini or somebody said, this is a job, you can't train too much for a job that's going to kill you, right? And it's true. That's why you guys are still training.
That was me. Yeah, I made it up.
But I mean, yes, you can't train too much, but in a city like Baltimore, it's hard to train 1,000 firefighters a year with 30 engine companies, because yes, we would love to just do all the training we can, but it costs money. Cities need money to pay for it. Are you gonna do it in service, out of service? Are you gonna pay people overtime? You can go take a shipboard course. Well, the Newark Fire Department's not small. You can't send 1 or 2 people, because then they have to be at work the day the ship happens, and to send them all, the cities.
No,
and I don't think Newark's a very rich city,
like Buffalo. Yeah,
I don't think so. It's easy for us as firefighters to say, "Oh, we should do this, we should do that, I should go here, I should go there," but somebody has to pay for it. I mean, personally, I'd love to go to tons of fire courses, but I have a budget. I can't go to them all.
The money after Charleston was no longer an object.
Yeah, it's. I understand that it costs more for bigger departments to go training, but proportionally per firefighter, it does not cost more. It costs the same. A city of 50,000, with 30 firefighters, or a city of 500,000 with 300 firefighters, the cost per firefighter is the same if you're doing the same level of training. In fact, it should get cheaper with the bigger departments, because
my volunteer fire department when I was on sent 2 to 4 people a year to FDIC. The career of the fire department I'm on right now is not going to send 400 people a year to FDIC. It
No,
just can't be
there's
done.
ways to spend your money wisely and get the biggest bang. There's no doubt about it. But your small your small volunteer fire department did not have its own training academy. Did not have,
Sure,
yeah,
and I can't speak for Baltimore, but lots of places. But you still have 30 stations times 4 shifts, and only so
yeah,
much time in a year to do all the things you have to do. And there's vehicle operations training, and medical training, and river
yeah,
rescue training, and high rise training, and wildland training, and it just keeps going on. And then before you know it, you're back to square one, and the new
yeah.
year's here, and you got to do it all over again. So I get why things don't always happen
You,
like we
you
sit
can
here and say
also
they should.
compare, level of service. And we have some cities that put 4 people on an aerial and have enough coverage for stations and stuff like that. Other cities that don't staff that much, maybe their training's better, but then they don't have the staffing on the units, or their runs are too long. I mean, so some administrations might waste money. I'll throw a firecracker into the mix here. I mean, you can go buy an electric fire truck and pay double what it costs you for a regular fire truck. Is that a wise cost, right? Or you could do. I had another example in my head now. I forgot what it was. Where you spend money on stuff you don't need versus green fire halls. I'm going to make an eco-friendly, green, no energy fire hall. Is that where I should spend my money, or should I spend it on training for my guys? Those are all the issues that come
I
up.
think one of the biggest, I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but the socioeconomics plays a big role. We look at Detroit,
Sure.
uh, they have no money, they're bankrupt, so they have a whole bunch of vacant homes they cannot deal with. And I'm guessing Baltimore is exactly the same way. So that also means there's less taxpayers. That means there's less money for the fire department, for staffing, for training, all this stuff. So it's a ripple effect that the worse your economy is off, the worse your fire training, your fire staff is going to be, but the increase in work is exponential. And that's where the risk is. So, in the end, if we could blame anybody without saying that the firefighters did something wrong, but blame the city, blame city council, blame them. I don't know, blame the fire chief not stepping up for his guys because you need the money to train them and tear them down. Like Detroit, I mean, it's been freaking just 15, 20 years now, but they're tearing down those vacant buildings and they have way less injured firefighters and fatalities, right? So step it up, Baltimore. That's on you. That's what I
Yeah,
would
look,
say.
look at Buffalo, New York. Okay, we had debates behind the scenes last year about the snowstorm and the inadequate equipment and stuff that Baltimore Fire had to deal with. I mean, and I was going on because I teach emergency management, right? I'm going, come on, guys, it's not like a snowstorm in Buffalo, New York is a surprise. You should have snowcats, or you should have four-wheel drive trucks, or you should have all this stuff. And you guys were kind of giving me the gears about that, but they still haven't hired an emergency manager in Baltimore. Council is dithering on hiring an emergency manager. I'm going, well, if you're the Buffalo, I mean, if you're the city of the size of Buffalo and you don't have an emergency manager because you don't want to appoint one, well, you know why they don't want to appoint one, because the person's going to say, hey, we need to step it up. We need to do like Houston did after Harvey, and we're buying a dozen high water trucks, and we're buying this and we're buying that. But of course, that's what people don't want an emergency
But
manager for.
Buffalo had all that equipment. It just
No, they
wasn't
didn't.
enough. No, they did.
No, they had
Oh yeah,
they had.
I showed you. They
I
have.
know they had
It's
one
not here.
skidoo.
It's not there. Yeah, exactly. One
What are you going
because
to do with one skidoo? They
well,
had one.
99% of the time it's enough. And
No, not
we've done
for
our due
emergency.
diligence, right?
Not for an emergency. They had one four-wheel drive truck. It was the crash truck at the airport. They only had one, and they were transporting people with the crash truck
They had
until
side
it
by
got stuck.
sides. They had
They had one
ski-doos.
one side by side. Come on,
Yeah,
Leslieville, Alberta has one side by side for 200 people. I
a
mean,
small department.
that's crazy. Yeah, because in case they need it.
Leslieville, Alberta has a rural area,
Yeah.
Paul. They need it.
Well,
It's a
for every
little different.
department, they have areas that they focus. And I would think that Baltimore is re-examining their priorities now, and they're refocusing. I know in one department that I was in, almost 50% of our calls, actually it was over 50% of our calls were medical assist calls. And we spent a pretty significant amount of our training time training for medicals. And if you looked at the number of times where the intervention actually was life-saving, because we had a fairly good EMS system, that proportion was not that high. There were lots of times where it assisted with the quality of life for the patient. But what it did do is, of course, all that time spent on training and going to medical calls actually interfered with our ability to train for fire protection.
Yep, for sure.
And so it's a question of priorities again, and priority there was that.
Cool. I said to the guys, we need to stop, wind this down soon, and Dirk told me to stop arguing. Okay. You guys are awesome.
Paul, do you want to mention Blue Card? You got your kickback for mentioning slicers.
Well,
they kicked him out.
But that was the answer to the Stricker Street fire, because I passed it around with my incident command friends. It was the example of all the stuff not to do for incident command was the Stricker Street fire.
Wait, Paul,
and the Stricker Street, ICS, Blue Card, or incident command, same thing.
Oh yeah. Mentioned ICS, Blue Card, and slicers. We're complete.
Well, we could talk about Brunacini's three main things. Risk a lot for savable lives, risk a little for savable property, risk nothing for stuff that's lost.
Exactly.
And then we can argue, what's the definition of risk? Because it's different for everybody, right? Yeah. But that should be another Tailboard talk, I think.
Great.
Anyway, read the Phoenix Regional Standard Operating Procedures, and they define what risk is and what calculated manner is. And Bruno's a great guy, had a lot of things. I don't know whether he invented that or just perfected the message. But this is from the 80s, my friends.
Blue Card works. Listen to those audio reports they put on their B Shifter podcast of the grabs and the tactics and the stuff they do. It does work. It teaches your officers those responsibilities, how to communicate, how to size up, and how to make decisions. Exactly why we're talking about this. Anyway.
I'm just waiting for the check from Blue Card. For how much
all right. They don't even listen to us yet, I don't think. But maybe one day.
Doug, you're so cynical.
The emergency traffic podcast brought to you.
That'd be the first sponsor right there.
Old man in a young man's body. Yeah. All right. Thanks everyone for this great chat. Hopefully our listeners enjoy it, and we will get together again soon. The next episode might be the Brackenridge with Chief Routley from Montreal, who actually wrote the report on the fire in 1988, where 4 firefighters lost their lives.
Be safe, everybody.
Stay low and go.
Sounds good. Yep.